Story time. 19 years ago, just before I joined the Navy, I was working as a commercial finish carpenter for this company Guy Evans Incorporated in San Diego, California. And one of the jobs that I did for that company was installing doors and windows as well as the ceiling in the chapel of Cathedral Catholic High School in the north of San Diego. And on Google Earth, we can still see my handiwork to this day with the click of a mouse button. All of those panels up there, the finished carpentry, the trim pieces, all that was done by me. And a couple of days I had a helper because those extra long, they were special order 9-foot long pieces of plywood. And my helper and I were having to put the plywood on top of a scissor lift, put the scissor lift all the way up to the top of the ceiling, hold it in place and shoot the screws in to get it to stay there. And at one point we had to move the scissor lift while we were up. And that's like, what, 25 feet in the air, something like that. And some other contractors were doing work here on the floor. They had cut a hole in the concrete, probably about that big. And they were doing some plumbing work or maybe some electrical work under the slab. And we drove the scissor lift into the hole. Now the hole had been covered in dirt, but it wasn't compacted down. So when the scissor lift tire rolled into the hole, the scissor lift tilted until it bottomed out, like the belly of the scissor lift actually hit the concrete. So it might have fallen, I don't know, 3 inches. Not much, a little bit of a rock. But when you're 30 feet in the air at the full extent of a scissor lift, 3 inches down here equates to a lot of movement up there. And my assistant and I were sure we were going to die at that moment. One of the scariest moments of my life. But hey, look at what I made. Pretty cool that it's still standing. And back when I was doing this work, this kit here was the creme de la creme. $750 it cost. I remember it vividly. You would hammer in these cleats. They're kind of like nails in this hardware on this jig, and you'd hammer them into the door frame or the door itself, and it would give you this pocket, which was just the perfect dimensions for running your router inside of it to get a perfect mortise for your hardware, whether it's your hinges or your strike plate or whatever it is to sit inside of. You can see this kit today is still on sale for the low price of $544. So it's not cheap. I don't know if it's completely worth it. You can do all of that work for a lot less money these days. But back then, 19 years ago, before we got everything cheap as can be from China, this was pretty much the only game in town. I'm renovating the back room of my house to be a laundry room as well as a second bathroom, but the existing door to the exterior from that room has problems. The door frame is a little bit rotten at the bottom and the frame is not straight with the door. There's quite a bit of a gap to the extent where we actually get some weather that blows in. We get snow flurries in through that gap. So that thing needs to be fixed. And I don't want to spend $300 on a new fully hung door when the door itself is perfectly functional. Thankfully, I have that prior work experience hanging doors, so it's right up my alley to be able to make a custom door frame. But I'm not going to be doing a lot of this type of work, so I don't want to go spend $544 on that professional jig kit. Now, I know that there are cheaper options available these days, but I don't want to spend any money at all. Thankfully, I own a 3D printer and I can draw in CAD. So here in my CAD platform of choice, which is Rhinoceros 7, you can see I've drawn 3 jigs. This one here is for the hinge, that's for the deadbolt, that's for the strike plate. And you can see I've got these recesses as well as these holes. I'll show you what that's all about in a few minutes. Into Bamboo Studio so I can get a very fast print on my Bamboo Lab X1 Carbon 3D printer. I love this printer, but I am super hesitant to use it for anything that might be sensitive. However, functional as this print is, China can know all about it. I don't care. But yeah, basically Bamboo Studio, as well as the printer itself, is spying on you. It reports back to China. They make you print through the cloud, through their servers in China. This is my hand router that I've had since I was doing that work in my 20s. And you can see I've got this special plate with the collar that gives the 1/2 inch bit an offset of 1/16 of an inch. So when I was drawing the geometry for the parts, all I needed to do was offset the pocket outside of the metal plates by 1/16 of an inch. So for doing the cutting, the plates will be temporarily affixed to the door frame using these 2 nails, and you can see I've already done the test cuts here on this piece. But when I want to get the plates off, what I'm going to have to do is use my little flat pry bar here and stick it into the geometry that I previously told you guys about and just pry up on it until I get those nails out. Nice and gentle because I don't want to break the plastic. So that is a nice pocket, perfectly cut to depth where it's flush with the hinge here, but you can see I didn't quite get the radius right at the corners. Definitely would not pass muster when I was doing professional work. For the strike plate here, we're getting a really nice fit. All right, the original door frame is pulled off the house, and we can see that it's definitely rotten here on the bottom. For the hinge jig, that gap bothered me enough that I ended up modifying this, and this one here at the top is now garbage. So let's use this one here and do a test. These little nail holes can get filled in with putty pretty easily. And that is a perfect fit. Unfortunately, when I pulled off the door, I found out about the rusty skin here and also the rot underneath. So that is just, that's not gonna fly. I can't reuse this door, and I could try to fix it, but this is pretty difficult. So better to just buy a whole new pre-hung door and save myself the time. So here it is, my pre-hung door all installed. Instead of, I don't know, 5 hours, this took me about 1. Looking at the rough opening here inside the house, we can see that everything was quite crooked, but I got it all plumb and it functions fantastically with the original door hardware here. However, there's one thing that doesn't quite work. I got the strike plate from the original hardware, but the deadbolt strike is the wrong size. So I will need to use one of my jigs after all. I've got the weather stripping out of the way, and I've traced this strike so I know exactly where it needs to go. And we can see that this bar on the print is too wide. I can't get up against the jamb close enough. Ooh, gyroed infill. Nicely lined up with the pencil mark. Of course, with the obligatory, that's not going anywhere. Like a glove. Then there's this specialized tool, trick of the trade, with the retractable drill bit, so it self-aligns in the holes and just perfectly centers. Now this is an old one, and they've maybe upgraded them since then, but I had to kind of modify mine by grinding the hole a little bit bigger so that it sheds the wood chips a little bit better. Some long screws, so they definitely firmly attach to the framing and not just the door frame. No, you can't come in the back door.
That's what she said.
And as it turns out, the guys who installed the hinges on the door frame at the factory have a lower standard of quality than I do. I don't like that gap, but there's nothing I can do about it. The holes are already drilled and everything's already straight, so that's the way it's gonna stay.
I'm the YouTube algorithm. You should subscribe to Design Prototype Test, ring the all bell and become a fiscal supporter by clicking on the links. As your benevolent overlord, I'm telling you that it will make your life better. Rather than allowing me to keep force-feeding you mass audience, vacuous content, you'll actually be shown the interesting stuff that most people miss.